Today, Stoicism is often seen as being emotionless, cold, and unbreakable. People say it means not showing feelings, not reacting, and just enduring everything in silence. You have probably heard phrases like, stay hard, do not feel, never show weakness. But that is not what Stoicism really is. Somewhere along the way, the meaning changed. What people call Stoicism today is very different from what it originally was. And that misunderstanding is quietly affecting how people deal with emotions, stress, and even their identity. If you look at social media, you will see Stoicism described as suppressing emotions. You hear things like, do not react, do not care, be cold, be untouchable. It is often marketed as strength, especially to men. The message becomes very simple. If you feel pain, hide it. If you are struggling, stay silent. If you are overwhelmed, push it down and keep moving. But ignoring emotions does not make you stronger. It only delays the moment when come back stronger. Because emotions do not disappear when you ignore them. They stay in the background. They build pressure slowly, quietly, over time. And eventually, that pressure shows up in other ways. Stress, anger, burnout, anxiety. Sometimes even complete emotional shutdown. This is where the modern idea of Stoicism becomes dangerous, because it teaches control in the wrong way. It teaches suppression instead of understanding. Real Stoicism teaches something very different. It is not about suppressing emotions. It is about understanding them, observing them, and choosing how to respond. The core idea of Stoicism is simple. There are things you can control and things you cannot. You cannot control what people think about you. You cannot control what happens in the world. You cannot control every outcome, but you can control how you respond. Your thoughts, your actions, your decisions, those are yours. That is where your power is. Stoicism teaches you to experience emotions without being controlled by them. That is a very important difference. You can feel anger without acting on it. You can feel fear without letting it stop you. You can feel sadness without losing your direction. You are not removing emotion. You are creating space between the emotion and your reaction. That space is where discipline lives. That space is where clarity comes from. Even the ancient Stoics understood this deeply. They were not emotionless. They wrote about frustration, stress, grief, and uncertainty. They experienced everything we experience today. But instead of being controlled by those feelings, they studied them. They questioned them. They trained themselves to respond with reason instead of impulse. So how did this idea become so misunderstood? Part of it comes from oversimplification. Complex philosophy gets reduced into short quotes, and those quotes lose their meaning when taken out of context. Control your emotions slowly becomes do not have emotions. Be disciplined becomes do not feel anything at all. Then modern culture adds another layer. There is constant pressure to perform, to succeed, to work harder, to always be improving. And in that environment, vulnerability starts to look like weakness. So people turn to Stoicism as a shield, not to understand themselves, but to protect themselves from feeling anything. And that is where the distortion grows. It also becomes tied to a certain idea of masculinity, where being strong means being silent, where showing emotion is seen as failure, where asking for help is seen as weakness. But that is not strength. That is isolation. Because real strength is not about feeling less. It is about handling more. It is about being aware of what you feel without being controlled by it. It is about facing discomfort instead of avoiding it. It is about choosing your response, even when emotions are intense. That takes far more discipline than pretending you do not care. Anyone can shut down. But not everyone can stay present, aware, and in control at the same time. That is real strength. That is what Stoicism was always about. Calm, not because there is no emotion, but because there is understanding. Control, not because feelings are gone, but because they are guided. Clarity, not because life is easy, but because your response is intentional. So Stoicism is not about being cold. It is not about being numb. It is not about hiding everything inside. It is about knowing yourself. It is about understanding what you feel and choosing what you do next. And if we understood that, everything would change. We would stop telling people to hide their emotions. We would stop confusing silence with strength. And instead, we would teach something much more useful. How to face emotions, how to process them, how to respond with clarity instead of reaction. That is what Stoicism really is. Not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it.